At its May 2024 meeting, the Mississippi State Personnel Board approved the following changes to the Mississippi State Employee Handbook and the MSPB Policy and Procedures Manual. These changes will be effective July 1st, 2024. The proposed revisions incorporate new laws and provide further clarity and refinement of current policies to assist agencies. So let's start with the substantive changes to the Mississippi State Employee Handbook. In Section 1.3, we inserted a link to the new Employee Appeals Board website with an explanation that employees and agencies may find appeal forms, FAQs, and the State Employee Handbook on the new website. The new EAB web address was also updated throughout the handbook. In Section 5.2 on telework, we inserted the MSPB Communications email address as the point of contact for agencies to provide copies of their telework policies to MSPB. The next three updates deal with telework reporting requirements. We inserted the requirement for agencies to notate within the online reporting system whether an employee is teleworking and if they are, in what capacity. Additionally, Section 5.2 was revised to require the telework policy and acknowledgments to be on file with MSPB before implementation. The section now clarifies that agencies not in compliance with the telework policy or allowing telework without submitting the required information to MSPB will be reflected on MSPB's reports to the AET and Appropriations Committees and PEER. In Chapter 9, in the definition section, we clarified that en banc hearing means an EAB hearing appeal conducted by all three hearing officers as provided in Section 9.9c. Section 9.9c gives the hearing officers the option for all three of them to hear a case together. In Section 9.4c, we included that filing fees may be paid electronically via debit or credit card. In Section 9.5, we inserted a sentence that employees and agencies have an ongoing duty to notify the EAB if an employee appeals the same issues in a separate administrative or judicial forum during the pending EAB appeal. In Section 9.13, we removed the provision in which the EAB will mail issued subpoenas to the sheriff's office. All issued subpoenas will be returned to the parties, who will now be responsible for forwarding the subpoenas to the sheriff's office for service. There are two substantive updates to Section 9.14. First, we clarified that when an appellant withdraws the appeal in writing, the hearing officer may also issue an order of dismissal after receipt of the request for withdrawal. We also inserted provisions to ensure that settlement agreements are in compliance with personnel statutes and MSPB policies. In Section 9.17h, we inserted the words, "unless the presiding hearing officer leaves the record open for additional evidence or submission of briefs," right before the sentence that says, "the record shall be considered closed 5 working days after the conclusion of the hearing." Now let's take a look at the substantive revisions to the MSPB Policy and Procedures Manual that will be effective July 1st, 2024. In Section 2.2.4, we removed the words "at the start salary of a" and inserted the words "at a minimum equitable salary of the" in the sentence so that it reads, "salary certification for emergency appointments shall be at a minimum equitable salary of the given classification." Next, we had several updates to policies related to recruitment. In Section 3.1.2, we inserted the word "should" in place of the word "will" in the sentence so it reads, "agencies should submit the requisition at least 5 working days prior to the opening date of the recruitment posting in the system." In Section 3.1.3, We inserted the requirement to advise MSPB when an agency is advertising using another method other than MSPB. In Section 3.1.6, we clarified that agencies advertising for non-state service positions exempt from recruitment may still utilize the help of MSPB for recruitment of those positions, but must do so within MSPB's advertising requirements. In Section 4.3.3, we provided a specific email address of subpanel@mspb.ms.gov to accept requests for substitution of minimum qualifications. In Section 4.4.1, we clarified requirements for agencies hiring part-time and time-limited non-state service employees, requiring those employees to be hired from a referred list. In Section 4.9.7, we inserted a sentence stating, for a permanent state service promotional position, the agency may consider any candidate who has completed at least 6 months of continuous service. In Section 4.9.8, the referred list will now expire after 75 days, which is reduced from the previous 120 days. In Section 5.5.1, we inserted the word families in the place of classifications regarding agencies' request for new job families to align with SEC squared terminology. In this section, the executive director is granted the authority to authorize the creation of additional levels of workers within an existing family. In Section 5.1.3, for role summary revision request, we inserted the word summary in the place of characteristics, examples of work. And in Section 5.2.2.c, we inserted the statutory requirement that employees' salaries may not exceed the salary of their agency head or the statutory maximum without statutory authority. Effective January 1st, 2024, elected officials' salaries were increased. Due to the increase of the elected officials' salaries, the legislature reduced the percentage above the governor's salary a state employee may earn. In Section 5.2.2e, we changed 150% to 125% of the maximum salary of the governor to reflect the change. In Section 5.2.3, we removed the word month and inserted the words pay period to clarify when salary adjustments should be received by MSPB. For title change request, in Section 5.3.2, part of the justification should include any organizational structure adjustments impacted by the change. Throughout Section 5.4, the language now requires a detailed justification on how a salary was determined for any new hire, not just those above market. In Sections 5.4.5 and 5.4.8, the new hire and reappointment requests must now be received by MSPB within the same pay period the individual begins or returns to work. In Section 5.4.6.a, the hire date for part-time and time-limited hires cannot be earlier than the date of issue of the referred list. In Section 5.4.6.g.1, for part-time and time-limited new hires, the referred list must be actioned. There were also several notable changes to legal services contract approval request in Section 6.5. In Section 6.5.1, we increased the threshold for board approval from over $75,000 to over $100,000. Additionally, we authorized the MSPB Executive Director to approve all contracts valued at $100,000 or less, including state retiree contracts, with the exception of contracts received more than 60 days after the proposed start date, regardless of the amount. In Section 6.5.1, we also inserted all of the requirements in the board's January 2016 letter regarding retroactive contracts. These requirements include the circumstances surrounding the contract being brought for consideration for retroactive approval, the steps the agency has taken to curtail requests for retroactive approval of contracts, and the number of retroactive contracts brought for consideration in the past 3 years. In Section 6.5.4, we inserted the requirement for agencies to send an electronic copy of their fully executed contracts to the Attorney General's office. The rule already requires they submit it to MSPB this way. Finally, in Section 6.5.5, the Executive Director must receive all notifications from agencies regarding the termination of contracts. To view MSPB's complete policies, including the Mississippi State Employee Handbook and Policy and Procedures Manual, visit our website at mspb.ms.gov.